the question of how do you give back, you know? It's kind of a weighty one when you kill something that's really beautiful and you're looking into its face and you're just like, wow, this is so, that like I took something really beautiful and I extinguished that life to feed my own, which is amazing. And the question of, yeah, like, how do I give thanks? How do I give back?
Jumping totally to something that will seem superficial, but it's not. In your endangered skills, you know, wonderful section, trapping and food and cultivating the plants and, you know, so on. I appreciated that you addressed something that I hadn't run into anywhere, which is the chapter that's called the Tao of Pooh, spelled not P-O-O-H as in Winnie the Pooh, but P-O-O, and it was like, how do you take? And I loved that you hadn't found that information elsewhere either. You know, you had to learn, in part, where do you bury these rich wastes that we are animals that need to bring our feces to the land just as much as the bear does. And that you included that, where to poo, you know, and where to bury it. And no, I mean, that sounds very superficial, but the point to me is that you worked that out and you included it.
Yeah, it's pretty fundamental too, right? It's a very bizarre and unexamined part of our reality that we just, you know, we take in all this stuff into our body, and then it should be this amazing loop, right? Of this unbroken chain of fertility that cycles back to the earth and from the earth back to the human, and we're just kind of a conduit to keep this cycle unbroken, and then just flushing it down a toilet into the water is, it's you know, it's not the nicest. It's not very graceful or anything.
and it's destructive because it's out of balance with the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's that cycle's broken. It's not going back to the land. So, I mean, just for me and my friends living on the land and pooing on the land, it was pretty profound after a while when we would talk about it. And you know, I would find a spot where I had taken a crap and buried it and go back there and there was a little apple tree sprouting out of it or something. It's just like, wow. It was really profound to see that, because it's just, that's such a beautiful, delicate thing, and that me, as this messed up human, was able to be like a fundamental part of that is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, you also touch into, I feel like in Unlearning, you're partly moving yourself, of course, to re-sacralizing, making sacred everything. And one of those had to do with killing. This is a culture that's just terribly afraid of death. Mortified, I mean. But you're finding, so tell us a little bit about refinding your way in the killing of an animal to eat.
Well, I was just finding it, really, because I didn't grow up doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess, a big part of my journey on the land has been learning how to kill animals and eat them, and trying to do that with a lot of integrity. And yeah, our culture is terrified of death. Basically, if you really get down to it, all of our fears are rooted in the fear of death. Because even if it's just you're afraid of losing a friendship or you're afraid of some change, it's a little death in your life. You know, it's it's the unknown or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's death. It's a death.
So it has been a really profound and beautiful kind of journey, learning more about killing death, and humbling and challenging, and yeah, it's amazing because everything. There's this quote by this old writer, William Saroyan, and he uses the pronoun he, which is kind of crappy, but it's a good quote still, and it's, "He who is most alive is fullest with death."
Fullest
with death.
With death.
Yeah. And you could just say it which is most alive is fullest with death, and it's true, because all that death really is, I mean, you can't have life without death.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
That's right. It's just part of that cycle, you know? It's the part that we don't really understand of that cycle.
It's a mystery, and that's
the
what
unknown,
kind of afraid.
right? And that's what we're afraid of.
That's right.
We're afraid, again, as much as we know about anything, we don't know what happens when we die. We don't know what happens to the part of us that illuminates our body or whatever.
That's right.
So,
that's right. Yeah.
So, but to fully, that's life, though. That's the spontaneous nature of life. That's the wild essence of life, is that unknown thing that you can't pin down.
It's embracing that along with the known. I mean, is that what you're partly saying? You're including it. You're not trying to push it away.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess hunting has been a one way of kind of, I guess, being broken open to that. Because when you kill an animal and you're really, I mean, hunting isn't necessarily a beautiful thing. It can be a really horrendous thing, you know? There's a lot of trophy hunters who just kill an animal and that's it. They take a picture with it and they high-five their buddies and they go home.
That feels like an abomination to me.
Yeah, but I mean, that's got nothing to do with hunting. That's just got to do with how certain people treat life, right? Because some people treat sex that way. You know, some people treat
eating. You know, you can take anything.
Yeah, and the more kind of tender and sacred something is, I'll use sex again as an example, that can be one of the most beautiful things.
Yes.
But at the same time, it can be one of the most heinous and violating and destructive things.
That's right.
And it's same with killing something. You know, it's really tender, so it can be this beautiful opening, or it can be like a really horrible defilement of life.
And once again, we're back to the distortions of civilization. I mean, you know, whether it's sex trafficking or pornography, or whether it's, you know, the orgasmic union of beings. I related to that a little bit, to that section of your book. I have not ever intentionally killed an animal yet, but soon after we moved to the land, I began to see the roadkill squirrels, you know, and realized I want to have a closer relationship. We have squirrels on the land, and the roadkill, you know, beyond it, and so got several roadkill squirrels, and it felt like a real sacred thing to thank that little being. And I did skin it and gut it and learned its anatomy. And did eat that animal. And it felt to me it was like my hunger to have a deeper relationship with this other being and to thank. I mean, so I'm known, you know, I'll stop with roadkill and at least take them over to the side of the road so someone else can, you know, and thank them and apologize for our having these big cars that go kill them. I mean, so I really, that intrigued me, what you have to say about the deer that was so beautiful, and you owe that deer. I mean, that deer's death has brought you life, and in a sense you come around to giving life to others from that.
Yeah, I mean, the question of how do you give back, you know? It's kind of a weighty one when you kill something that's really beautiful and you're looking into its face and you're just like, wow, this is so... that, like, I took something really beautiful and I extinguished that life to feed my own, which is amazing. And the question of, like, how do I give thanks? How do I give back? And I don't have any personal ceremony of kind of symbolically doing that. I'm not that interested in that. I'm more interested in tying that giving back just into my life. And that's a question that I don't know if it's really human to have answers to those questions. It's just human to, I mean, for me, it just is part of my process, is wondering how and then trying.
So Miles, you said, you wrote Unlearn, Rewild in 2011, and there's been a lot of learning and change since then. So give us an idea of where you're moving, you know, what's moving for you.
Well, I just finished writing a book about hunting called The Compassionate Hunter's Guidebook, and we kind of just talked about some of the juice of that. It's a practical book, but it's filled with some of what we were just talking about. But as far as my thinking, it's changed a lot. It's been a really, really kind of dynamic and transformational period. And I guess the conclusion that I come to in Unlearn is that, like we were talking about, the fundamental root of our own disconnection and our culture's disconnection is is at the level of consciousness, and that's not how I always thought about it, but it's becoming more and more apparent that that's, if there's going to be a shift in my own life and in the world around me, it's going to happen at that level. But,
Here,
yeah,
the mind,
but also,
the worldview,
and in the context of our lives, in an embodied way, this yin and yang balanced kind of interplay. But yeah, I guess I've been going deeper and deeper into that realm of understanding consciousness, understanding how to align more with that life force, with that kind of central part of us that is, that's really, it's the essence. You know, we have this thin filament. I was giving a talk once, and I was talking about that metaphor of kind of how our wild nature and tapping into it, and that's kind of the fundamental journey here. That's the real story. If we're going to live more sustainably, if we're going to live in a good way, that's where it starts. And so I was like, I just don't know how to start with that. And or they were just seemed to think it was a really daunting proposition.
People who are hearing you saying,
yeah,
I don't know how to start.
One person
okay,
in the audience
right.
just thought it was really exasperated, because that's kind of this, it's an intangible thing, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's all that we really are, you know? I could, it would be the same as me complaining that I'm tired of being wool, or I'm tired of being cotton. I'm tired of just of that. And I want to go back to having skin. You know, I want to have skin again, because I'm tired of looking at this. But the reality is that as soon as I lift that thin filament of covering, that all I had all along was skin. And I think that that's kind of that true nature that all of us are and all of us have. It's right there. It's like, it's all we really are. And there's this thin illusion that our culture is based on, and that we all have agreed upon, and that is enforced and influenced. But it's just this thin little layer in our minds, and that the real action of the living world is so much stronger than that. There's just so much power and so much force in that life force.
You make that thin veneer makes me think that we've considered that it would probably take several generations of children, I mean generations of humans, to begin to turn that thin veneer, which feels like a heavy layer of programming to me, you know, to shift that back towards the sacred, back towards relationship with all the natural world. Till you have a generation that has been immersed in that their whole lives, and that's going to be an evolving process for sure. But the stable, sustainable cultures had at least a good chunk of that. They had to be.
Yeah. The funny thing is, you know, there's another shift in my thinking. Is, I guess, it's, you know, there's a friend of mine once was complaining. It was when I was living in a squat for many, many years, and it was communal, and at the end of it, it stopped existing a couple of years ago, because everyone started going on their different paths. And one of my friends, I stayed living there, but one of my friends, she was the last to leave, and she was kind of lamenting how everything was falling apart, and she was lamenting, oh, we live in such a painful time. We're all wounded, and we live in this wounded world, and we just can't make it, you know? We're all too messed up. We tried to live communally here, and it just folded, and there's just this engine of confusion around us that just seems to prevent us from, yeah, I just wish I was born in another time, is what she was getting at.
Yes, okay.
And I was thinking, and I said to her, I was like, you know what, I bet that if we were born 500 years ago, before Europeans arrived on this coast, in the village down there, probably around here, near the ocean, I bet we'd be living up in the hills squatting away from the stupid village. Because it was too messed up, and we wanted to experience true reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
we wanted to find out truth. You know, I think that it's part of the human journey, is this being fractured, and it's really interesting. And once I personally kind of submitted to that, then all of a sudden there was this power, because we learn through being broken. We learn through imperfection.
Interesting.
You know,
Yes.
like that's how
yes.
evolution happens.
Huh.
And to align with that natural force, it's like, yeah, I mean, there needs to be a tsunami. There needs to be a forest fire. There needs to be that push for learning to happen. That there needs to be. I mean, in our case, we all collectively have these wounds, as individuals and as a culture, and the ways that we get those wounds, I wouldn't excuse, but as far as healing and having a story, I'm much more into the story where this is actually a really unique opportunity to learn, because perfection does not allow for learning.
Yes. Yeah. No.
And so perfection isn't the goal, you know, I mean.
Right, and perfection appears to be like a static state. I mean, that's why when people say things are perfect as they are,
and that,
well, it's an unfolding.
You know, and the way that the living world works is not static. It's not stagnant. It's dynamic and it's evolving. And there's.
You just gave me a picture here. You know, so the tsunami needs to happen, or Fukushima needs to happen, or whatever, because it's part of our evolving awakening. My concern, of course, is about all the others we're taking down with us, all of the other more than human community that are getting, damaged because we're taking over so much
of the planet.
It's a complex
territory.
Yeah.
That's a complex territory. And like I said, I wouldn't excuse anyone who violates the human or non-human world, you know, and that's not, you know, that's antithetical to what I'm interested in. But as, you know, the story that we tell ourselves, the narrative that we live in, determines how we live and what spawns up around us.
And one of the points you make in the book that I found really intriguing is that there's one set of pictures that say, as you said earlier, if industrial civilization stopped tomorrow, you know, the wheels of what's destroying the planet is, you know, just, you know, stop tomorrow, or the other view that we, you know, then everything would be okay.
Yeah.
That's one myth we have. And the other is that we're in the end times, and it will be catastrophic like this, and so on.
Yeah.
And your point was rather things are always collapsing.
Yeah.
And maybe also things are always regenerating.
Yeah, and every collapse is an opportunity for some things to evolve, right? Like, that death feeding off of life, you know,
Or that forest fire that suddenly gives some space for some light, you know, for the early succession plants to come in, that, you know, even though the big ones got taken out. It seems to me that very comforting way to look at the world.
Yeah, it's more empowering. It doesn't stop things from being challenging.
Yes.
It doesn't stop, you know, it doesn't stop the growing pains or whatever, you know what I mean? But it's a more empowering narrative than the hopelessness that our culture is built on. And then people who want to change the culture still often work from that narrative, and it's no good.
Right, or we just switch this power holder for that power holder, but we're still caught in the same, you know, hope and lack of hope kind of, hopelessness kind of place.
Yeah.
Are there other things that we haven't touched on that you know you'd love to bring up? I realize we could do this for a long time.
I don't think so. I think we set a pretty wide net there.
I'm glad, because I feel like it occurs to me that you're taking that question, whatever it was that you couldn't even articulate when you were 17 and went out to do like Thoreau and live in the wild, and then take it further into living in community, you know, further at the edges. It feels to me like that quest, which is ongoing, as you said, you know, we will hope to watch and stay in touch with you as things continue to unfold. I feel like you're having the courage to walk it, to walk those ideas and those questions, the unlearn part, in a way that very few people take that far. And I want to thank you for that. It's like you give me hope. Here we go, hope. You know, a prospect of another generation raising deeper questions and making it through the narrows of all kinds of changes that are going to be happening on the earth in your lifetime, you know, and those after you. So, you know, I want to be one of your supporters to say, keep going and come back and keep reporting to the rest of us what you're seeing and and raising those hard questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
My guest is Miles Olson, the author of Unlearn, Rewild, who is still unlearning and rewilding and carrying on to where the life energy is. I'm Janaea Donaldson. This is Peak Moment TV. Join us next time.